Welcome back. We are talking with Douglas Ralph, who's Managing Director of Snag and Inspect, about some of the, highlighting some of the issues, the possible issues with regards to handover and inspecting one's property. Now, I'm quite amazed actually by this story that you've just highlighted, Douglas, is that apparently Nikhil is starting to do handovers on a number of their properties, but you're only allowed to have an hour to inspect, and you're not allowed to actually... Sorry, let me just get this correct. Are you allowed to bring in someone like yourself if you want to?
They've made different comments to different clients, and they are allowing us to come in and do inspections. And we had a client earlier in the week was told he could only bring himself and one other person. We have been in the properties where there's been 2 or 3 of us that have been there, and so it's a little different in some cases. But it's still very restricted to 1 hour, and they watch the clock. After 1 hour, they literally say, you are done, and they have an individual there taking notes on everything that you identify. That person stops taking notes after 1 hour.
And it doesn't correlate with the size of the property? A studio versus a 5-bedroom villa?
And that's an argument we've been pushing to them. Our clients have been pushing, is that how can you expect a 1 hour inspection for a property of that size?
Right.
It's completely unreasonable. These individuals have paid millions of dirhams, waited 3 years late, and they're being given 30 minutes and told this is what you get.
And what do you think they're trying to hide? I mean, are they trying to hide? I mean, what's the goal for this?
It's a huge concern. I can't really say what they're trying to hide because we haven't been able to look in depth. I do know that we have had an opportunity to look at a few things when they weren't watching us closely, and we do see things that really shouldn't be the way they are. They are items that will cost money later, and will it be a defect within the first year or something that shows up? Very good chance it won't, because it's a system that is used, but it's not. Give it a few years, then it starts having problems, and it will cost the owner extra money to repair.
What can you do in an hour?
It's extremely difficult. It's a surface inspection. You look at the windows, make sure they close and lock properly. They seal the doors, the floors, the walls, the cabinetry, and the ceiling of the bathtub, the caulking around the edge of the bathtub, and the toilets, how they sit on the floor, because you're not allowed to run water.
And what are some of the most significant defects that you have seen or expect to see?
Well, in the ceiling, when you're allowed to do a MEP inspection, you look at the ceiling, you find where the electrical boxes on the fan coils have not been terminated properly. The electrical wiring is not done properly in the ceiling. You have leaks in your sink. You have a leak in the bathtub. You end up with moisture problems in the floor, which, again, another item we weren't allowed to do was to bring in moisture meters or any type of inspection device. It was a visual. Only.
And these sort of defects, identify these sort of defects, I would imagine takes quite a bit of time to be able to actually sort of go inside the walls and inside the ceilings.
Well, at least to use machinery to do it as well.
A good inspection of a 4-bedroom villa will take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, because you don't know what you're going to find and how much your notes you're taking for those problems.
And it's ironic that you were not allowed to bring the moisture, whatever the machinery that identifies the level of moisture, because moisture is a huge problem in the UAE, in the UAE or in Dubai in particular. We've seen it in so many different projects, because at least, for example, in NTR on the Palm, one of the issues has been with air conditioning units in some of the apartments. I guess the pipes were not insulated properly.
Correct.
And when the heat basically, or the heat met, I guess, the cold air, it created a lot of moisture.
Correct. The high humidity hitting the chilled water lines caused condensation and then dripping, and black mold grows very fast.
I got you. I mean, let me just put this in perspective, though. How many people do bring in someone such as yourself, Douglas, anyway, for handovers?
It's getting better and better, or a larger number of people, because of education.
Okay.
We started 3 years ago, and we felt it would take time for people in the market to understand the value of it. Westerners, Europeans understand it but don't know it's available. I'm still getting phone calls. I didn't know this was out there. Last time I was on the show, we had people call and say, I never knew there were people here doing this type of service.
Well, because a lot of them were done in-house, weren't they, where you'd go with someone from the developer when they'd go with you and make a list.
Right.
I think, is that how it was
It used to be where the developer would go with you and they would kind of walk you around, but I used to watch this happen as a building manager, and they would lead them purposely and look at the beautiful view here and distract you to where you're not really looking at your property. You're admiring the view and the various things, but you're not seeing the condition and the quality. And then you sign a piece of paper that waives away your rights to further turn in snags, and you're stuck with it.
And to bring a specific example that we're dealing with currently, and it's actually this one involves DMUC and Park Towers and the DIFC. Our client has multiple units, and DMUC basically scheduled the inspection day, and then 5 out of 7 units, for example, were okay for the most part. But the other 2 units, they did not have drainage connection or DUA connection. I mean, these are pretty significant structural defects or shortfalls, if you will. And so, but the danger is that if you've got 5 units and 5 actually have those, it's very easy to just kind of assume that the other 2 would also have the same. And we still, to this day, we have no idea how you can take possession of 2 units that have no drainage hookups or electricity connection,
and for them to expect you to.
Right
exactly.
And yes. Because basically it becomes unusable. The units become unusable if they have no electricity or drainage connections. And and yet we're expected to sign the handover papers right there on the spot and waive all of our rights.
I mean, what can the consumer or the homeowner do in this case? Stall?
Well, yeah, but you see, the stalling presents all sorts of problems. I mean, and that's really the only option, and that's what most homeowners are doing. But it presents a number of problems. One is that they've already been waiting for so long, and for some of the landlords, they bought these properties for themselves to live, and in the meantime they're paying either for rent elsewhere, or they're paying mortgage interest in the meantime. So they don't have the benefit of the property, so they're really eager to take possession of the property so they can save the expense of spending it elsewhere. Then the other one is sometimes some of the developers are starting to impose penalties that if you don't take possession on time, then there'll be a penalty. And similarly with banks, if you have a mortgage on the property, that you will be required to. You are paying your mortgage installments in the meantime, so you are incurring additional cost.
So really, I mean, people think, sign it off, let's just get in there and...
But basically, yes,
because can't wait any longer,
right? And in the meantime, it's kind of a balancing act. And some homeowners think, okay, well, if we take possession and we'll start renting them out, at least we'll start covering some kind of some of the expense. They're really kind of being forced into.
But I don't understand why. I'm just trying to get to grips with why you wouldn't want. What's the problem with someone going in and doing it? I mean, I'd hate to assume, but you'd wonder: is it because? Is there enough confidence in the quality of the building? Are they afraid that maybe you might come in and find something? I don't know. I can put those questions out to you.
Right. As an inspector, I have to assume something's wrong, or some type of deal or agreement has been made with the contractor that they will not be in-depth inspections. Something doesn't make sense.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Doug. So is it with the contractor or with the developer?
Well, it's the developer directly doing the handover,
right.
But the contractor has representatives there that are making notes of the defects that are found during the visual inspection.
So they, in effect, if anything was wrong, would be the ones responsible
to repair it, right?
Developer.
The developer would go back to the contractor and say, this is your area. You're the subcontractor or main contractor. You're responsible for fixing these items. And if there has been some type of an agreement between the developer and the contractor to limit the amount of cost or retrofits, and it's hard to say if those agreements are in place or not. Right. We don't know as the individual.
Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, this is The Property Show, and Ludmila Yamalova, managing partner with Yamalova and Plewka Legal Consultants, is with us. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
And Mike Small of VSM Consulting. Hello there.
Hello,
And our guest is Douglas Ralph, who's managing director of Snag and Inspect. Doug, welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon.
We're just finding out about, I suppose, some of the issues that you face in just doing your job, getting into properties, inspecting properties, and just some of the challenges to that. And we have had an interesting message come through because we were asking you, our listeners, have you ever had a problem with the snagging and actually getting being able to get into the building and onto the property. And one of our listeners said, well, we were forced to sign a waiver to take any legal actions against the developer because of the year-long delay before handover. We had paid all fees to date and really needed to take possession. And that sort of just highlights exactly what you were saying, Ludmila, that some people are just, they can't wait any longer. They just need to get in there, start either making some income if they're renting it, or move in and not be paying extra rent if they're living somewhere else. So you can see why people would not necessarily.
And that's exactly why developers can afford to do what they're doing. And they know that people basically are in the bind, and they are eager to take possession.
No, they count on the individuals of having one villa, one apartment. They don't have the financial resources. They don't have the time to fight it. And they count on it.
We also had an interesting story also where a client that bought in Jumeirah Heights with Nikhil and just refused to take handover because they haven't really been able to inspect properly, and because, they bought a garden villa or a garden view townhouse, and there's no garden, and that's just among other things. But truly, there is no garden. But it's actually the property is called a garden view townhouse, and.
Well, it might have a view of a garden.
Well, maybe one day.
Might not be their own.
But maybe one day.
But picture on the wall.
But in the meantime, the Nikhil representative has been hassling and sort of trying to force the client to take possession or to take handover. And the client said, "Listen, we had identified a number of issues with the property, and we're still waiting for a response from you before we'll consider taking possession." And then the representative threatened to foreclose or to basically default. Default the client. Interestingly enough, our client has paid 100%.
So they can't.
So he's like, so how are you going to default me if I've paid all the dues? The only thing I have not done is that I haven't signed, the waiver of liabilities and the handover papers, which obviously include the waiver of liabilities. So I mean, it gets that absurd, if you will.
I can't understand.